Hey, it is Halloween. Yikes! And while many thrill seekers enjoy checking out haunted houses, watching horror films, it can impact your mental health. You might not have thought about this, or maybe you did if these types of things really get to you, really scare you. Here to explain the science behind the scares, the fears, the phobias, I'm talking to psychologist with UTHealth, Dr. Jennifer Bahrman. Thank you so much for coming in this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I mean, I've never really thought about why some people like haunted houses and scary movies, even if it really scares them later after it's over. I mean, is there some sort of like science behind this?
Yes, there is. So fear is first off a very normal emotion. It's one of our core emotions that we have. And we often seek out that recreational fear, those haunted houses, the scary movies, the true crime podcasts even, because we want to learn about fear. And that's really an innate experience that we have, that we want to seek out what fear is and how our body responds to it, the dangers of the world, and how we can most effectively cope with it.
So in that aspect, it's a good thing. Can it, I guess, too many of these horror movies or haunted houses, or I mean, some of them can be very graphic, can it negatively impact your mental health?
Absolutely. So of course there's always too much of a good thing that we can get, and there are individual differences in our sensitivity to fear and into those recreational fear activities. But having too much of it can definitely elicit a lot more of that anxiety. It can impact our sleep for individuals who are more anxiety sensitive. So in other words, they have a fear of the fear. It can definitely be a lot more challenging for them to get through the coping of that fearful activity.
Yeah, and so let's talk about, when we're talking about horror films, positive aspects to them.
So when we experience fear, what we're actually having, our body is responding with a fight or flight response. So our bodies basically, or our brain in other words, is submitting adrenaline, dopamine, and endorphins, which are positive neurotransmitters to have. So it feels good for us. And so when we are experiencing recreational fear, the good news is that that fear doesn't actually happen in real life. So we are left with these positive neurotransmitters without having had to use them for survival.
Yeah, like sort of also, I kind of feel like you're describing experiencing the whole range of emotions. I mean, that is on this end, just like people like to watch rom-coms because they like to cry.
Absolutely. So very similarly there. And you know, when people are stuck in kind of an anxious mindset already, it can be a way to kind of get out of it. You're not ruminating on your own anxieties, on your own stressors. You're getting to be thinking about something else that is eliciting a similar response, but again, without that need for kind of survival.
Right, and maybe you're watching and coming up with ways to escape like a situation if you're ever in a similar one. I mean, you hear about these things and the person's like, oh, I've watched 10 of these, you know, I'm a horror movie buff, and so then you know how to escape a dangerous situation. I kid a little bit. Can we talk about boundaries? I'm impressed with my kids' friends who come over to our house and we might suggest a movie, and I just mean like a kid-appropriate scary movie, that these kids say, nope, I don't like scary movies. I mean, are there ways to set boundaries, whether you're a child, whether you're an adult?
Boundaries are always a good thing to have, right? They tell us as well as other people where our limits are. And so as it pertains to scary movies or scary experiences in general, it is really important that we have those boundaries. We need to kind of tap into ourselves where our limits are. If our limit is, I can't watch a scary movie, or I can't, I have to leave the room in the midst of it or whatnot, that's okay. It's okay to say no. It's okay to leave kind of that situation. So boundaries are a good thing.
And then getting back to that whole sleep thing, I mean, and how it can impact our sleep. I mean, is that just because you're frightened, you're afraid to go to sleep, or is it like your levels of anxiety?
A little bit of both. So we do have that adrenaline kick through fear, through that fight or flight experience. So part of it is adrenaline gets us kind of riled up, and so it might be difficult to fall asleep. But just about everyone has experienced at some point where you're thinking about something, maybe that's anxiety, maybe that's a stressor, maybe that's a significant person in your life, and sure enough, that is kind of the theme of one's dream. And so if you're thinking about an anxiety-inducing situation right before bed, it can definitely lead to more nightmares, difficulty falling asleep, things like that.
Yeah, all very interesting around this time of year. And so while we can sort of experience those anxiety, the fear, get the dopamine kick, for people who know that they don't like that, there's
it's okay
nothing
to say no.
It's okay to say no. Dr. Bahrman, thank you so much for coming in this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
Happy Halloween.